Welcome and good day, folks. It is Wednesday the 3rd of February 2016. My name is Shaun Reader and I'm coming to you from the western edge of the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire, where the weather at present is cold, sort of sunny and cloudy, but I've got good visibility over here looking west over the Severn Estuary towards Wales there. Today I want to look at this. The AIIB, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, marking Beijing's most ambitious foray into financial diplomacy and global economic governance. Global economic governance was officially launched. Now, when was this? Well, June 29th last year. And I say that because both James Corbett at CorbettReport.com, also Mike Robinson, UK Column News, has been following the latest to do with the Xi Jinping's Middle East tour, the Asia Pacific perspective, as James has reported here, and we see recently the China and Saudi deals that have been struck up. The reason I'm having a look at let's just have a look at this bank first. This bank then, well, it's open for business. It says January the 19th 2016. So what now? This is from the diplomat .com. It opens its doors this week. What's it about? Doors officially opened January the 16th. First meeting, Board of Directors, 17th and 18th. Okay, and as we've found out, or found now, we've got the Premier of China's tour as well. We've got the Asian, beg your pardon, the AIIB here was opened. What's the word? The launch, I beg your pardon, June 29th 2015, AIIB launch signals China's new ambition. Financial Times, the new ambition for global economic governance, as it's said here. Reported slightly differently by the Washington Post last year in April the 6th, how to stop worrying and love the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So the difference in reportage last year, of course, we had China. I think what became clear that China's economy seemed to change in nature from one model to another. China dumped multiple billions of petrodollar paper last year, instead going for the laying down the infrastructure and just changing the nature of its economy. So what we construed as the bottoming out of its economy was merely the transformation, the purposeful transformation, and the changing of its economy from one to the other. Now, there was a fear in some circles that the Chinese were doing this in some way to deliberately push the West, particularly the US, into hyperinflation. Hence the worry, which the Washington Post last year. But we have such things connected with the AIIB, the idea of the new Silk Road strategy, US's leadership in the region, the new Silk Road strategy. Worth many a search. The either transformation or revisiting. What would you call it? As a couple of thousand years ago, the Renaissance, the rise of secular humanism, the westernizing of the globe was affected. Really, sort of, the easternizing of the Western secular curriculum, if you see what I mean, globally, would have sort of rolled out. rolled out over the past 1500, 2000 years, underpinned by the Silk Road, quite literally bringing silk, spices, knowledge, technology, gunpowder, and knowledge that perhaps had been considered arcane or occult under the early church tradition of Western Europe, would now be considered in the rise of spiritualized secular humanism, arriving from the East via vectors such as Italian and Belgian banking, Silk Road trade, the transference of learning places such as libraries from Christian hands to to Muslim ones in 7th, 8th century, and then the reconquering of that. We have the rolling out of all that, so we've got something quite large. Now, as Ankit Panda, January the 19th, has said, well, so it's open for business this year, so now what? Well, its articles of agreement of the AIIB, approved at the end of 2015, it's really more about this. As thediplomat.com tells us, come into form as a multilateral leader offering alternate vision of global governance to post-war World War II institutions championed by the United States. For the US and Japan, the best course of action will be to let the AIIB fill Asia's increasing demands for infrastructure and, if circumstances permit, eventually join the AIIB. Well, it seems as though circumstances are permitting, because we've had a raft of countries, including UK, join recently. Of particular note to that a couple of the Jameses picked up on is that at the at the launch of this last year, there is a at the launch of this, if I can get to the right picture now, the launch is accompanied by the appearance of this statue, the AIIB logo, no less. ChinaDaily.com.China, 18th of January 2016. This is He Fang, an associate professor at Nanjing University of the Arts, who has created the following sculpture. Now, this sculpture, the AIIB logo, look carefully. It seems to be what is a globe with a globe within a globe, a sphere within a sphere, with a greyed out grey out woolly, fairly unappetizing hemisphere there, and the other hemisphere looking more metallic, textured, engaging, in other words, a whole lot more exciting. And in the middle, as the carapace of this falls off, there is another structure emerging, all pipelined up, hence the suggestion of the Silk Road. And in fact, we have again a look at the idea here, perhaps, that the New World Order of the rolling out of the Earth Charter, Maurice Strong and all the rest, post 1992, as the green-agenda.com said, I haven't got the link for the moment, green-agenda.com, you may not agree with its spiritualities, but on green-agenda.com is a fairly succinct, and you may agree, accurate, or you may wish to document further, squaring the circle between the rolling out of the Earth Charter, the World Conservation Bank 1992, and particularly the central part that Maurice Strong has had to do with that. And, well, again, I would advise interested viewers and readers to visit James CorbettReport.com for some very fascinating pointers and springboards to your own researches on this fascinating character, who's arguably the spiritual founder, one of the spiritual founders and framers of what seems to be the new global constitution, or at least the first iterations of. Now, what is happening here? Let's just say the AIIB is a multilateral bank, yes, came operational January 16, yes, launch marks a milestone in the reform of global economic governance. So there's no messing about, there's nothing arcane or hidden, we're talking overtly, we're changing the way that the globe is governed, and we seem to be symbolically suggesting that the West is grey, invisible and dead and needs to be sloughed off, whereas the East is the presently exciting, kinetic part of the world, but even that seemingly will be subsumed by a globalism and an interconnectedness that is part and parcel of the whole thing. So one could think, oh yes, Silk Road, there's perhaps symbolic of the new Silk Road, or the new Silk Road project, in fact the re-emergence of the Silk Road emblem from the past 1500 years, whereas the Silk Road sort of conveyed and kick-started secular humanism, also conveying Eastern spiritualities, technology, and a whole series of challenges and breaking waves on the Western Greek-born secular humanism, onto which was superimposed 2,000 years of Judeo-Christianity, which it could be arguably said that the spirituality that is behind the UN, as quoted by, as documentably quoted by Maurice Strong et al., is all to do with the passing of geopolitical and spiritual governance and power from the West, which is holding humanity back, is the idea, to the East. And this process will bring about the transformation of the world from within to a new globalism. Okay, right. Let's go further with this. See this shape. Now, James Corbett was James, so I beg your pardon, the two Jameses, as it were. James Evan Pilato was on the week next week as well with James Corbett there. Drew attention to the fact that it was reminiscent of work by Arnaldo Pomodoro. Now, Amusing Planet here, June 18th last year, speaks about this, Sfera con Sfera, the spheres within spheres, a series of sculptures by Italian sculptor Arnaldo Pomodoro. There are many of these such things. The first one was created and placed around the Vatican in the 1960s, after which a series set up at major power centres all over the world, and learning centres and landmark centres, for instance at the Trinity College Dublin, the seems to be a mechanized, industrialized new world emerging out of the center as a seed from the old one. Now, Arnoldo Pomodoro said here, the inner ball represents the earth, the outer ball represents Christianity. The design of the internal layers, which look like the gears or the cogwheels of a complex machine, symbolizes the fragility and complexity of the world. Yeah, right. The thing about symbolism is that, and artists are aware of this, that the successful use of symbolism in literature and art depends on making one's symbolism universal enough to be recognized cross-culturally. Oh gosh, I'm thinking of the idea of Yeats's swans or the swastika. It means different things. Different cultures ascribe different things to this symbol. So the symbol may not purposefully transmit one set of messages from one culture to another across the oceans of time. Rather, the symbol is sufficiently open-ended and nebulous and vague to allow individual human subjective interpretations to be ascribed to it. So, in other words, what we're saying, yeah, right, this represents Christianity. My personal artistic sensibility reading of this is, well, yeah, new world order emerging from the old, nothing to do with Christianity there. However, the idea of fracture, of destruction, and something technical emerging from that. Now, we've seen those before, so why, we could ask, do we have this seemingly, like the sphere, is not totally unconnected with the idea of the sphere, Arnoldo Pomodoro's spheres within spheres? Well, it has been argued that these were a form of the omphalos. I say the omphalos. An omphalos is the Greek word for navel, obviously to do with birth. Now, why do I say this? Well, if I get the right one, Prometheus, omphalos, no, blah 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 blah. No, I will do this. This is the omphalos of Delphi. Delphi, the Oracle of Apollo in Greece. Greece, the emergent cradle of Western civilization. The omphalos was not only an object of Hellenic religious symbolism and world centrality, it was considered an object of power. So world centrality, object of power, these seemingly have been placed as, oh gosh, artistic place markers, I suppose it could be said, or ritualized way markers to civilization. In other words, this there's an omphalos that was this one in Delphi. There is an omphalos in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. There are other such things at various places. Now, the original omphalos is this egg-shaped thing that is not undivisible. Now, can we just have a look at the symbolism here? We have this egg-shaped, vaguely earth-shaped, could we say, round thing, suggestive of egg or birth. The literature on this suggests that we've actually got a combination and development of both the idea of the lingam, the male phallic sexual symbol, with the yoni, which is the female counterpart, all to do with two halves, formation of the one, transformation of the two halves into the united whole. However, we have got the idea of something in emergent birth with appears to be a net or something restrictive around that. I say that because in this we have, at the AIIB one, the idea of that nets. Well, it seems to be converted. We now see some like a net, but rather than restrictive, it's one that is to do with resources and united, emerging as the new order from within. So what is this omphalos? Omphalos was placed over the slaughtering by Apollo of this creature. Apollo here with bow and arrow, divine and a god, killing what seems to be a dragon with a bow and arrow. This is Apollo killing Python, not a python. Now, Python is a name that is also given to sibyls and oracles at Delphi, in terms of communicating with the divine via means of trances and all the rest. That was the Apollo, the oracle at Delphi, which was placed in the same place as the omphalos that was erected apparently to commemorate and over the top of the slaying of this, the python. Python, we know Python as being a snake. Well, here, why is it a dragon here? Well, there's an older type in Greek mythology, drache, the dragon. The idea of Python. Python, the Greek word pythein, means to rot, stink, decompose. Now, this creature then, the python, this is a description of the creature. Rather than it's a description of its personality, of its content, of its inner nature. It looks like a dragon. It's rotting. It's called python because it's rotten. So the word python doesn't mean snake; it means rotten. However, we have now taken the word python, not from the word from snake, but conflated the idea of dragon, serpent, by the means of Genesis 3 of the Judeo-Christian tradition. But we've got something rotten within it that is killed by God. Something rotten. Hang on. We've got the idea that something of a corrupt nature has been slaughtered, by the forces of good, which is apparently God, over which, to commemorate the birth of the new order from the chaos of that, to celebrate this is this egg-like, navel-like omphalos. So you have the emergence of divine order, even Greek civilization from the old. Now, see how we get the idea of serpent and dragon in the Western tradition, as well as Judeo-Christian one from Genesis 3, and various other points throughout the Bible as well. The idea here is that the emergent civilization of Greece seeking to invent its own past, to validate itself and give an appearance and sense and propagandizement of longevity, would be to make up a history and tradition. Now, this omphalos then is the idea, is from where the new order emerged, Delphic Oracle. Now, you have to ask yourself at point, it's rather ironic that the birth of the order that we have had from Greece, Delphi Oracle, Apollo, Well, we've now that very same country is essentially turned into something that, if we're not very careful, look like the largest quarantine camp in history. So, remarkably, ironically, the birthplace then, and seemingly the potential holding place now for, well, a very different form of humanity than that might have been purported a couple of thousand years ago. Now, or rather 2,500 years ago. Various versions of Python's birth and death at the hands of Apollo. Right, various versions. So I suggest you pick your way carefully through these. But the central idea is the banishing of the old by the new order, with Apollo there firing a arrow. I labour that because Koresh, aka Dogstar, aka Sirius, talks about the symbolism of 2012 London Olympics here at the dogstar.com. Very interesting, highly entertaining. You may disagree, you may agree. Some interesting features. This talks of the Olympic myth. Now we come on to that in a second. The Olympics is to do not so much with the defeat of the Persians and marathon and all that, and the the Western order against like Persian chaos. No. It's very much to do with the passing of the torch of wisdom, enlightenment, and freedom from the hands of Zeus in Olympus to the hands of man, passed by Prometheus. Prometheus, one of the Titans. Let's have a look at this guy before we carry on. Now, Prometheus, as we found perhaps last time, one of the Titans. What does he do? And here we are, GreekMythology.com. Prometheus tricks Zeus. Zeus manages to wrest back from Prometheus, but Prometheus has done a lot of damage, because there's Pandora also, who has pulled out all the evils of the world are pulled out at roughly about the same time, or not in too unconnected sort of way, as Prometheus brings down the fire of wisdom, light, intellect, and reason, and self-determination for humanity from the divine, brings it to humans. The idea is that rather than the Christian idea of the harpazo or rapture, or the taking of God's own children by the return of God in the form of Jesus, the second coming, we have the idea of actually, man affects his own rapture by reason of his intellect. He doesn't need a God if God doesn't exist. Man has been kept behind in his untransformed, stultified state by 2,000 years of Judeo-Christianity, is the thought and argument behind the site I took you to the other day, which is the green-agenda.com. Well worth a look. You may not agree with its spiritualities. As I say, this emerges as the front end of a site called the Gethsemane Olivet Fellowship, which is a Christian fellowship in New Zealand, but I will leave you to investigate its statements of faith. But as I've said in another program, this makes a reasonable fist of drawing of squaring the circle between the spiritual UN, in other words, Maurice Strong, and the spiritualities that he may or not have been au fait with, but tying that with the outworkings of the Earth Charter and all the the rolling out, secular and spiritual, and even economic, like the World Conservation Bank from 1992, aka the Rio Summit. Of course, it was only itself, the outwork in known as Agenda 21, goes back, gosh, all through, well, we can trace it back to 1972. You'll still see Maurice Strong in terms connected with the whole, again, the rollout of the 1972 Stockholm package. So anyone looking at the history of the UN, particularly the rolling out of the what seems to be the New World Order infrastructure, that might be a good place to track some of this, some of the stuff feeding this through. Gosh, so Prometheus steals mankind's self-reliance and steering of his own fate and destiny back from the idea of a god, because we want the New World Order where man rescues himself in that so we then have an idea, as we have in the 2012 Olympics, which is about passing the torch from one tradition to the other, right? The appropriation by man of his own wisdom. You see, Olympics doesn't represent any sporting achievement in terms of Persia and Greece. It's actually much more accurately to do with the myth of transformation of society by the placement of spiritual power from the divine into the heart of man, which is exactly what it's all about. So LondonOlympics.com, dogstar.com, aka Sirius, this is well worth looking at. We have Usain Bolt, as in lightning bolt, as in Zeus. Okay, we have the Prometheus myth alluded to in terms of, oh gosh, mankind affecting his own rapture. We've got the well, let's go into this now. We have a rainbow, 6 colours there. The 6, the number of humanity, arguably in religious traditions, definitely one less than God's 7-coloured rainbow in Genesis. Now that rainbow was sent by God as a sign of his promise that he would never again destroy or judge the world via water. There's a fire judgment coming instead. So it's a sign of God's promise. And the rainbow came at the end of the arc, representative and foreshadowing of the rapture, the harpazo, the taking back, the claiming of God's people by God himself, prefigured by the Ark of Noah being raised above the chaos that had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and new humanity emerging out of that, and the rainbow signifying that. Now we have that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, but we notice how we get a perversion of this, or a retreatment, depending on what your point of view is. Rather than divine rainbow of God's command, 7 colours, we have the 6-coloured rainbow, with these 2 creatures here who are pointing in a heavenly way. Usain the Bolt, is this the lightning bolt of Zeus? Well, that's very, very nice. It's a fine, dynamic, heroic image. See the symbolic pattern of movement goes from left to right. That's quite hopeful. It's heroic from left to right. The eye goes from left to right. So we've got the equation with Zeus and his lightning bolts there. The same bolt, the bolt. But look at the aspect. It has the aspect of an archer. So we again have this return to the idea of the archery of Apollo. We've got the combination of the Apollo myth, the killing of the python, the placement of the omphalos over the top, and we have this conflated with the idea of Prometheus, who rescues fire from the gods, which is replicated in the Olympic thing. Now, Morpurgo's film out of the 2012 Olympic accompanier, really interesting. We I think last time we picked up on the fact that that the author of this site, Dogstar aka Sirius, makes makes a very interesting comment in terms of Wenlock and Mandeville, who apparently, for watchers of this, are the names of these characters who announce. They are very almost like divine characters. We have the replacement of the mankind affecting his own rapture. We have the introduction of this off-world seeding, extraterrestrial seeding. In other words, the thing that bothers atheists and evolutionists is that man is such a wonderfully complex piece of work that he couldn't possibly have actually come out as we originally thought, being spawned out of some random collision of amino acids in a volcanic pool, like pseudoscientists would say in 1970. However, things are now things are now much different. What have we got? We've got these two creatures here, Wenlock and Mandeville. We seem to have introduced the idea of alien rescue, replacing the idea of divine harpazo or rapture by God, and also buttered up alongside the idea of mankind affecting his own rapture. So we have a conflation of the rainbow, the harmony, the hemisphere, the semicircle, two halves needing completion, affected by the appearance of oft-worlders along a rainbow. You know, we've had this meme throughout throughout the history. Of course, the rainbow bridge, Jimi Hendrix, Purple Rain, Prince, transgender. Do you see what I mean? One could go really down the rabbit hole and say all this is conscious and purposeful. I suppose a Christian might say, well, yes, at source it is in terms of spiritual. However, it can only be argued or guessed at in terms of how much a priori and inner hermetic arcane knowledge the transmitters or the implementers of what seems to be a cogent spiritual global policy, how much they are informed. We could ask ourselves, to what extent are the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Chase Banks, and all the rest actually cognizant, either via spiritual means or by ritualized rituals. To what extent do these people believe they are transforming the world for overall good or overall bad? The essence of the enemy in the Christian tradition is liar from the beginning. Liar, thief and murderer. The whole idea then pointing to, whereas Jesus will come as a thief in the night. Kleptos is the Greek. Doesn't he also talk about the devil as being the thief, the murderer? Gosh, is he like the devil? No, that's not what he's saying, but he's saying that as the Christian, Satan, the enemy, in a sense, becomes more and more adept at deceiving, finally wishing to deceive that he's in fact another Christ, or an alternative Christ, or in fact the real one where he isn't. We have the idea then of an enemy who steals what doesn't belong to him. right, the kleptos, the thief, with the idea of Jesus' appearance as kleptos, as if he's not a thief, but as if he were, to steal back or to take, forcibly take what does belong to him. Now that's the whole difference, and we could explore that meme of spiritual seduction, the Jezebel meme, and what is apparent and what isn't. But here, do we have the suggestion of extraterrestrial salvation, seeding, via means of these things? Now this extraterrestrial seeding, obviously enough, it comes up in what film? Yes, Prometheus, the Ridley Scott. The Prometheus myth also, as we said, is explored in William Golding's Pincher Martin, where instead of having his liver pecked out like the real Prometheus, Pincher Martin is on a rock in the after the Second World War, and railing at God, having his and facing certain death for his pride. Similarly to the Frankenstein myth, the Mary Shelley creature, a new man, except rather than a new man, this was actually the instigator of chaos, because it was made up of criminal random body parts. So what looks good on the surface is actually corrupt within. You know, the python might look dragonly, but except it was python, pythane. The real nature of the python is one of decomposition. Anyways, why are we looking at this? We've said the idea of omphalos, the sphere, the transformation of society. Are we just being a bit random here? Does this go back any further? Yes, I'm looking here gamely for a little bit more history on this idea of the omphalos. And as a case, as an aside, we see these little wingnut things at the side. We're still on first legend here. It's talking about the omphalos. We're in fact here. Down there we see that little triangle with the two little flappy things there. I won't go back there for the moment, but I advise you to go back to Sirius's page there and see if you can on the that will look very, very different. Oh, can we do this? Shall I be cheeky and try and do it anyway? Or have I forgotten? I've probably forgotten, haven't I? Okay. Beg your pardon. Yes, there we are. You see that image there? The omphalos is related to the idea of things called bitile handles. I'll leave you to look up what those are. These are the bitile handles. Now, the author Dogstar, aka Sirius, may well be onto something, of course, in terms of symbolism. There. However, bear in mind the questionable or arguable history behind the Baphomet symbol, allegory, meme of the 11th and 12th century. When that look a little closer at that, all is not what it seems about that either. But anyway, I shall leave you with that. So back one, let's just look a little bit, and there's the 2012 Paralympic Games thing. And notice the rainbow colours there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rainbow colours, yeah, torch, rainbow rescue, yeah, rescue humanity, Wenlock and Mandeville. Oh gosh, why does the name Jimmy Savile just emerge to me from my subconsciousness? Yes, those words, isn't it? What have we got? Right, this site, firstlegends.info, and then I'm going to bring it to a close. We have a more in detail discussion of the omphalos and bitiles here. The omphalos, this idea of navel, is in fact a development of two ideas. One of the male sexual symbolism in sculpture, and the other of females combined in a new way. What we've got here, you might be able to make out here in this very old omphalos here, or pre-omphalos. We can track this through, now it says Sumerian and Babylonian. Yes, I'll stick with what I know because I can't document that. But the suggestion of that net motif there. Now this is not, this is a very, very old thing. I don't actually know what that is, but I will leave that for you to have a look at. There is our omphalos there with the net. This is the Delphic Oracle one. Notice stylized and similar. We have the idea of the egg, birth, navel idea, something restraining that process, something keeping it back, right? The serpent stopping the egg, something restraining the emergence of the new order. Something should be. So we've got the conflation of the male and female lingam and yoni symbols in sculpture that have been fused together, conflating the ideas of a net that is restraining humanity from reaching its full potential. Conflating this net now becomes the idea of the serpent around the egg, stopping the emergence there. Do you see where we're getting from here? The idea is then that as early humanity, as secular humanism, Greek civilization emerged as a result of placing this seal of fixedness represented by the nets over the omphalos, over the python symbolically buried under there. So you have rot, decomposition, the old chaos, the old order passed away, symbolized by the rebirth of civilization from the omphalos. What is presently stopping that birth of civilization, as green-agenda.com says, is 2,000 years of Judeo-Christianity. Right, the green. Now, this actually does go on to talk about the global biodiversity assessment and also the Earth Charter. So we're then back in Maurice Strong, and this all this all ties together in a very interesting manner. There was one thing I was looking for then as I was doing that, wasn't I? The nets. And so finally we get the sophistication of that net now has become the subdermal. This net is not the thing on the old order that is restraining it. The net is now off. In fact, we've got the emergence. See how the new world breaks out like a fruit from the old skin of the old. First bit of the hemispherical skin to go is the west, grey and dead. The power passes to the east, which is much more exciting and alive, and from this east emerges the new pipelines of interconnectivity and nettedness and unification of the new world, of which the present power base is in the east. What we do to ratify power in our omphalos model, we place omphaloses or omphalodies, I don't know, at various points of spiritual, religious, political, geopolitical power. The Vatican, right? These again are Pomodoro's own sphericon spheres, the spheres within spheres, place of academic learning, spiritual, intellectual, and political power. Exactly the same then being purported by this symbolic move with the AIIB open for business, to which European countries are now signatories, and Britain itself is under the protection of the new ambition. Now, the artist itself and various other places, of course, have also spoken about this as being to do with the reform of global economic governance as held by China, DINK, which is exactly the same meme development of the foreshadowed idea from Arnaldo Pomodoro, which is itself a refinement of the omphalos, which represents the birth of a new society under which is buried for good something dead, old and rotten, Pythane, that we call the Python. The horrible thing is, as the spirituality behind Maurice Strong, the idea is that actually mankind burying the Python, we're doing actually the opposite to what we're saying. Mankind is of the belief by the emergent new world order that is completely godless, that we're going into a new transformed age. However, typologically it would see that the decomposed rot that is wished to be killed by the new Apollo, the dragon, the force of chaos, is not the devil. This is referring to secular humanity's view of the Christian God. 2,000 years of Judeo-Christianity in the mind of the spirituality behind secular humanism is that it is 2,000 years of Judeo-Christianity that is Python, that is Pythane, in other words, that is decomposed and acts as nothing but the net that restrains humanity, which has been clearly identified and needs to be taken away, and the symbolic enthronement of the taking away of this can be seen throughout such memes and symbols as this. So we've got alien intelligence, off-world seeding, we've got Prometheus, we've got the new agenda, we've got the two halves, the two broken halves of humanity form in that demiurge of the need to be transformed into its new oneness, its third nature, its unified, transformed nature. Well, wind the West up, because Judeo-Christianity has done that. We need the new birth of humanity, the guardians of which, as this emerges, and as foreshadowed by the work, perhaps symbolically in the work of Arnaldo Pomodoro's versions of the omphalos, the final fruition being this. Okay. Good faith will move mountains, according to He. Aside from creating the sculpture, He is the mastermind behind the design of AIIB's logo, which stood out from the other entries to be selected for use. I bet it did. Global economic governance, and there we've got it symbolically done. And finally, if I just dot the I's and cross the T's with its developments, that will be enough. This one then, first legend.info, the omphalos. This tracks the development from the earliest Indus Valley civilizations. Now, the Indus Valley civilizations, particularly as found in the archaeology of the 19th century, the early 20th century, places like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, these places were found to be remarkably well built, with good civic planning, flush toilets, street planning, civic communities, and all the lot. And these were mysterious people, yet not unconnected with the emergence of what became Hinduism. Now, in this Indus Valley civilization were discovered many statues, fertility statues, but in particular things to be known as lingam and yoni. The lingam, to do with the male reproductive organ in statue, and you see there that texturing there, indicative, not unconnected with the net that we've seen. We've got the yoni as well, which is the female reproductive thing. We've mentioned this, the new emergent order, man prevented from being transformed because of nasty Judeo-Christianity. And Judeo-Christianity is itself not the liberator, but the tire up of humanity. In fact, Judeo-Christianity is the real enemy that is stopping the emergence of new life. Do you see how this is? You see the symbolism here. I will leave you to investigate that. There's those bitile handles as well, and various other things, and that's very interesting. And I think I will leave it there for now. If I forget something, I shall tack it on to next time. So there we are. East comes up, east in the ascendant, west on the way out, because it's really Judeo-Christianity and 2,000 years that's kept mankind untransformed. We need a new world order, and as man does at any suitable junctures from one state to another, loves to ritualize it, loves to peg it down, loves to give it a sense of having antiquity and time modernness. Very much similar to we can see this in Nebuchadnezzar, when Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians did do what they were going to do, and were used as a tool of God's judgment in the by way of refining the Jews and affecting the exile and affecting the prefiguration of the rapture, because the exile is the prefiguration of the removal of God's people by God as the second coming of the Messiah in the Christian tradition. Anyway, before I go rambling on again, we will leave it there. If I've forgotten anything, I will tack it on next time. My name is Shaun Reader, and goodbye for now. Thank you so much for listening. Cheerio.